Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Floyd Street's Finest, presented by Great Flood Brewing Company. Of course, this is a Louisville basketball podcast, part of the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm your host, Jeff Greer. Today's guest is Nick Coffey from WKRD and a friend of the pod, great guy, and we will have plenty to talk about with him. Before we get to that conversation, we cover Chris Mack. We cover, obviously, Louisville's big win over Wake Forest as of this recording early the next morning, and get ready for the upcoming new year, the final 18 games of Louisville's ACC schedule, and talk a little bit more about the state of the program. Before we do that, I do want to just remind you to please leave a review on whatever podcasting platform it is that you use. If they have a review system, it helps us in the algorithm, especially on Apple Podcasts, to help other people find this. So we'd love for more people to know about Floyd Street's Finest and, of course, a Field of 68. We've got a million podcasts going. There's a YouTube channel as well. Make sure you subscribe to there and watch some good video content, as well as following all the accounts on Twitter. And just as a reminder, we are going to, through the new season or through the new year, going to continue to be a weekly show throughout the course of this season. And as we get closer to the NCAA tournament, I would imagine there will be maybe some weeks where we have a couple more than just one episode per week as we load up getting ready for the big dance. Louisville got a huge win against Wake Forest, and not necessarily one that, and maybe it will end up being a big resume building game for Louisville over the course of the rest of the season, because I think Wake Forest is a solid team in the ACC. They certainly seem like they're going to be a top 6, 7, 8 team in the league this season. Off to a good start. And Alondes Williams is a very good player for Wake Forest, and so is Jake LaRavia. Two really solid players for them, and I think Williams may be an all-ACC first-teamer by the time this season ends. But more than just a solid win in that sense for Louisville, I think they really desperately needed an emotional experience in a victory because of what went down pretty much the rest of the month. It was a disappointing month for Louisville, capped by a COVID pause. Obviously, no one, not going to sit here and blame people for that, but it did suck to miss out on the Kentucky rivalry game. And hopefully that somehow gets rescheduled. Maybe in the new year, we'll find a spot where Kentucky and Louisville can play each other in the new year with everyone healthy, and they can make it happen. We'll see. But in the meantime, Louisville needed a big victory against an opponent that was solid and fighting through some of those missed moments that they had against Western Kentucky, where they worked their way back into the game and never quite got over the hump in that game. A disappointing loss down in Bowling Green to what is a very solid Western Kentucky team. But against Wake Forest, Louisville managed to find a way to get over that hump, get the lead late in that game, kept fighting and making some big shots from guys who were brought in to be those veteran guard presence type guys between Mason Faulkner and Noah Locke. Of course, Malik Williams playing a big factor in it. And I think a big factor as well last night was Sam Williamson being aggressive, getting to the rim, drawing fouls, which is a huge part of offensive efficiency. And for Louisville to make 25 free throws last night and draw a bunch of fouls was critical to them being able to overcome what was one of their worst 2-point shooting percentage performances in a long time. 18 points in the paint, the fewest of the season so far, only 2 more than that dismal Duke ACC tournament loss back in March. For Louisville. So a frustrating evening around the rim, but they made up for it by shooting well from 3, drawing fouls and making some big shots when they needed to, and playing excellent defense. Jared West deserves a tip of the cap for that. And the free throw shooting as well was a big factor. And Sidney Curry, how about Sidney Curry coming off the bench and having himself an important second half for Louisville. So a big win for the Cardinals emotionally, and now they will get ready to play Georgia Tech coming up this weekend. Just as a reminder, if you're a newsletter subscriber as well, there is no newsletter this week, but we will be back in full force next week as Louisville starts the new year, and so do we and they will have 17 more ACC games after this weekend's contest against Georgia Tech. Cards fans, Great Flood is going all out this season during all televised Cardinals women's and men's basketball games this season. Their drinks 10% cheaper for the entirety of the game. Could have taken advantage of it yesterday. Take advantage of it on Saturday, 6 p.m. for the men's game. And the women's game is tonight. By the time you hear this podcast, maybe it'll be too late, but 7 p.m. on Thursday night, I'll be calling play-by-play for Louisville Boston College. This pricing is available at both our Highlands Tap Room and Middletown Restaurant for Great Flood. We love hosting you and can't wait to root along with you as we cheer on our Cardinals. Thank you for your loyal support and go Cards. And as a side note, they're now expanding their options in the tap room for the first time in 7 years, offering wine by the glass or bottle, and a liquor and cocktail menu is coming soon for Sundays at either location. Enjoy endless mimosas. That's, you gotta take advantage of that. Did you see the Chris Beard press conference? They're offering, I think it's a Big 12 matchup. They're playing at like 11 a.m. And they're offering mimosas. So, hey, with the amount of booze that is for sale in the Yum Center, maybe there's something that they could work out for games there. Before we move on to our conversation with Nick Coffey, let me also tell you about a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now is the time, because they're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. What sets them apart is they require just one play through to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your money and your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season well underway, and now we're rounding the corner, getting ready for conference play especially, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the Bet Rivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, here's my conversation with Nick Coffey. All right, we are joined by Nick Coffey, the morning host over at 790 WKRD, a guy who you know as the Card Connect, which is how I first got to know you, Nick, from back in the day. And it's great to have you on the pod. It's been too long to not have had you on here, so I apologize for the delay, but it's nice to have you, the last guest of 2021. This has been a crazy year for you, I'm sure, with everything, trying to record your show. And I know you're back in the studio now, but man, a lot of people recording from home for the last year and a half. So how are you doing? You had
I'm good.
People saw on Twitter last week the scary night out that you and your family had. I'm glad that you're safe, and especially all the kids in the family are safe. Yeah, I mean, we've been all thinking about you.
Well, thank you. I'm good. And I appreciate everybody who has reached out in the last week or so. It's still a week later, doesn't seem like it really happened. I think each day I've woke up, I kind of asked myself, did that really happen? But we're all completely fine as far as, our safety. We were unharmed. And our kids, that's the biggest blessing in this, other than us being okay, is that our kids they're too young to understand what it all had happened. And that's, that's probably honestly the biggest blessing more than anything, because other than of course being okay, just because my son is 18 months old. My daughter, she's 5, and she knows something happened, but she doesn't know what happened. So, no, we're good. I mean, for those who don't know specifics, we were at a restaurant in Louisville that we go to all the time. I'm a regular there. Great place to watch a game, have dinner with your family, and a fight broke out, but it really didn't. I mean, I within a matter of seconds after my family that was at the table within feet, probably 8 to 10 feet of where this happened, said, hey, there's a fight going on. And sure enough, as soon as I realized, oh, there is a fight, one gunshot, my family and I, again, are within feet of it. I kind of blacked out a little bit. I ended up on the floor with my son, and my wife was right next to me. We looked across from us, and right there, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, had our 5-year-old daughter, who was actually closer to it. They were across the table from us. So once we realized what was going on, that was a very scary situation. But I'll never forget my brother-in-law. He got my attention and said, we need to go to the kitchen. And we were right next to the kitchen. So we kind of crawled our way in there. And at that point, the shooting had ended, but 2 people were killed, and just a very tragic situation. And I always say, I wonder what I would do if I was in that situation where you're around a gunshot or somebody decides to show up and start shooting. I mean, in fact, when we were in the kitchen waiting for the cops to question us and whatnot, and just get our side of the story as to what we saw and what we heard, my sister-in-law said, I've always wondered what I would do in that situation. And it made me realize that I've probably just been living in my own bubble and just thinking I'm invincible, because I'd never given much thought to that. I just been living my life and not thinking about those kind of things. And now I will. And it's made me appreciate a lot of stuff. Of course, this happened just a couple of days before Christmas, so it definitely made the time with the family during the holidays a little more special, and made me not want to take it for granted. But we're good, we're fine, and I appreciate everybody reaching out to check on us over the last week or so.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have to think about what you would do in those situations. It sucks that we've even arrived at this point in our lives and in this society that that's a thing. But obviously, very, very glad to hear that everyone is okay in your family, and our hearts go out to those who are affected by all of this, and especially around the holidays. I mean, it's sad at any point, it's scary at any point, but especially when we're all supposed to be gathered around the Christmas tree or celebrating Hanukkah for those who celebrate that, and just it's a time to be around family and celebrate, and it's just sad that it happened. So yes, we are all very glad that you are doing okay, and it's almost, Nick, it's almost like and I'm sure you feel this way doing your show, like it's a release for us to talk about basketball and to talk about sports after experiencing stuff like that.
It was great to have the time off with, because I actually went ahead with the UK UofL game getting postponed or canceled, whatever's going to happen. That gave me the chance to burn up vacation days. So I actually got more time off during all this than expected. But by the time we got to the end of the holiday, I was ready to get back to my routine and get back to talking basketball and college football and that stuff, just because when I'm just sitting at home, and of course you can't turn on the TV without seeing the story about what happened. So you're right, it is a nice escape. Heck, doing this is really, from a fan's perspective, because I'm a fan like a lot of people, it's almost like therapy for me. And being able to see Louisville in action last night kind of gets me back to my routine, which was much needed for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that then. We're feeding into the new year here. When Nick and I are recording this, we are last night Louisville beat Wake Forest, which I don't think anyone would argue otherwise was probably their most important win of the season. I mean, I think the Bahamas were a pair of really important wins for Louisville early in the season to kind of see what it looked like when they play well and play tough. But after some shaky play in December, finishing the month with a win over a Wake Forest team that sure looks like a squad that's going to be a real factor in the ACC this year, a much needed win in front of the loudest crowd, I think, that the M Center has had this season. They are playing Georgia Tech on Sunday, so we've got a little bit of a cushion between recording this and the next game. But Nick, let's start big picture. You're as close to anyone around this program. You've obviously been watching closely. I know you played hoops at a high level, so you understand the game differently. How do you assess where this team is and where this program is in year 4 of Chris Mack's tenure, but also in a very important season of his tenure?
I would say big picture, with this current season being a very important one, and Chris Mack knows that. I don't think they have a huge problem in like the talent department. Like, even though they've had some results so far this year that are head scratching, I mean, losing to Furman at home, losing to DePaul at home, and then losing the way you did to Western. I mean, those that's obviously not the results that you wanted and needed in year 4 for Chris Mack. But I don't think it's oh crap, what are you going to do? They don't have any players. I just think putting it all together has been a bigger issue than I would have anticipated. But maybe it's due to the fact that they had their coach for a long time, then they didn't have him for a month, essentially. I mean, I think there are some factors as to why they still look like they're rounding into form, and they're still a work in progress. But I totally agree with you on the Wake Forest game was so important because of what happened. Like, I don't even know how much different their resume is now than it was before that game. Probably not a whole lot different, but you can't have the losses continue to stack up when you put yourself in this position with the losses that I just mentioned. So they needed it in a major way. They got it. I think they've been a pretty good defensive team since Chris Mack's been here. I think that's the case this year. I think they're still top 25 in the Ken Palm in defensive efficiency. They've got a new element here with Jared West and his ability to really just be a pest to seemingly any opposing team's best player. They've always been a good rebounding team since Chris Mack's been here. And then since early on this year, they had some struggles, and that seemed like it could be a weakness. And then they go down to the Bahamas and really win those games by rebounding and playing tough, which is what we didn't see in the first 4 games. So really, to me, it's all about the offense. And I still don't think they've been able to find what I call a formula to get high quality looks. Even the game last night, they didn't shoot a great percentage against Wake Forest. They did shoot good from 3 because I think they took good looks. But the way I described it was baby steps. I think early on you could see a clear goal of getting the ball into the paint in some form or fashion. I don't know if they were necessarily running specific sets for guys, but the Sam Williamson curl, that just seems to be something that if that could get him going to the free throw line consistently, get his confidence going, that could be a big boost. Jae'Lyn Withers and Dre Davis, there were 2 plays that stand out to me where I don't think they converted, but it just looked as if, okay, Jae'Lyn Withers is now doing some things we saw last year where he's using his athleticism, his physicality around the rim to put himself in a good position to either get fouled or score the ball. Same thing with Dre Davis. He's got plenty of there's going to be plenty of times where he's got a matchup advantage with his size that he could put himself in a tough spot. So it's baby steps. They're still far from a finished product offensively, a lot of work to be done. But I did see improvement in that, an emphasis to get to the free throw line, get to the paint. And I just thought they weren't firing up the first good look that they had from 3. So back to your initial question, big picture, they got a lot of work to do. I don't think they're a tournament team right now when you look at their resume, but the tournament isn't set in late December. They've got a couple of months to really work on that resume. And there's 2 ways to look at it. You can look at the ACC and say, man, there aren't many opportunities to get big wins to really significantly improve your resume. But on the other side, you could really stack up your wins if you continue to improve and you play well. I mean, Louisville went 12-6 in the ACC in 2017, and I think they were 25-9 going into the NCAA tournament in 2017, and they got a 2 seed. That record this year, you could be like an 8 seed. Like, it's just crazy. The ACC has not given you, I mean, the league is, and this has been a trend here, and it doesn't seem like it's getting a ton of attention nationally, but the league is just not what it once was.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but part of it is coaching. I think the league is not kept up with the Joneses as far as some of the coaching hires that have been made with some programs. Some coaches are very close to the end of their tenures, and their programs have kind of been average or below average. A lot of places have been decimated by injuries, but there's so many different factors that have all played into the ACC just not being what we all grew up thinking it was, which is this, and what it was when Louisville joined the league, which was just a power league that, you know, could get 8-9 teams in the NCAA tournament. But you mentioned a couple things in there that I think are important to the Louisville discussion, Nick. And I know that you have talked about this. I know that a lot of us have either written about it or talked about it, that Louisville, the team that it has on paper, you kind of said, okay, they've got 8 newcomers. Now 7 of them are healthy to play this year. And everything else being equal, you would expect Malik Williams, Jae'Lyn Withers, and Sam Williamson to be kind of and Dre Davis to a lesser extent, but those 3 guys to be really the foundation upon which you build anything else. And if you can get 3 or 4 of your transfers and newcomers to be impact players, you already got your rotation there with 6, 7, 8 guys, your primary rotation anyway. And until last night, Withers and Williamson combined had 23 points through the month of December. They had looked, especially Sam, looked just like he had the yips. I mean, he looked extremely uncomfortable on the floor. How much confidence do you have after watching them last night? Withers, like you said, doing a little bit more what we're used to. He got on the glass a lot more. Sam Williamson got on the glass. He finished with 12 and 8. Do you see this game potentially as a launching point for them to get back to what we all kind of expected from them at the beginning of the season?
It needs to be, but will it be? Sam Williamson, I think his biggest issue really since day one has been inconsistencies. the way he got the 12-8 against Wake Forest, if you think that's not even something that needs to be luck or fluky. That's just being aggressive. And that's something he can seemingly control. Why it's not been there, I don't know. Just a hunch for me. I think starting helps him. I think that gives him a little bit of confidence. And I don't know if he earned that through practice or if it was more so because of the issues they had with COVID. Regardless, I like to see him in the starting lineup. And if that's what it takes to get, I mean, he's capable of doing even more than what he did last night. But if he gets to the line like he did and he's just in the paint like that and he's active on the backboard, I mean, it's such a game changer. So when it comes to Sam, he's been inconsistent throughout. So I'd be a liar if I said I feel like, yep, here we go. This is what you're going to get night in and night out. I mean, towards the end of the 4-game stretch at home to start the season and in the first game in the Bahamas, he was playing. I mean, it looked like he had really found an identity as a player, doing exactly that, mid-range and just being active on the backboard. And here's to hoping that if you're Louisville, that this is now, as you said, the springboard for that to happen. With Jae'Lyn Withers, I don't know. I'm almost speechless as to what has played out for him thus far in his redshirt sophomore season. Like Jae'Lyn Withers last year was a good player against good teams. I mean, I look like a fool, Jeff. I voted in preseason all ACC and I didn't feel like a homer doing it. I didn't feel like a homer doing it because
a lot of people did, man.
I put him ahead. I had him there over, is it Louisville for Virginia Tech? Yeah, so I had him there over him because he had a good season last year as well, but Jae'Lyn actually outplayed him from what I remember in that game. And I just thought, man, that's a raw redshirt freshman, his first taste of college basketball. He's going to have what a lot of Louisville fans have been able to see over the years, guys making that big jump from first season of action to second season. And he's not been himself. I don't know what it is. I think clearly playing him on the perimeter more is something he probably wants to do. And I know he's a guy that is capable of knocking down 3-pointers when he gets good looks. He showed that even in the game against Wake Forest. But there was never a scenario, in my opinion, where Louisville was going to be a team that mattered, where they were going to be a team that was making the tournament that people had to fear, unless Jae'Lyn Withers was a factor. So that hasn't happened. And in fact, even last night, I think he only played about 17 minutes. So progress, he knocked down shots, looked more comfortable. As you mentioned, he was on the backboard a lot more. But, I don't know what it's going to take to get him going. I think you start from outside or you start from inside and work outwards as far as getting him the ball in the paint, letting him utilize his athleticism around the rim, get the line, and then you can show the mid-range jump shot. Then you can take the 3-point shot if it's a good one where you've got your feet set. But as to why he's not been in, I mean, there have been some times where he does make a good move and then he'll lose the ball off his knee or just have flukish plays. So I hate to pile on him because he's not the only guy that has had some struggles this year and maybe not met expectation, but there's two ways to look at it. One, you're making improvement and he's not really taken a huge step forward, but also the other side of it is that we know he's better than what he's playing. So therefore, if he does turn it on and this recent game is a springboard, it wouldn't be a total shocker. But again, I just can't take Louisville. I just have a hard time seeing this Louisville team being one that is a threat to good teams if he's not a factor. And he's a good player.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel pretty much the same way with him and Sam, and that when they are aggressive and they're confident and they are engaged, they are talented players with good size and athleticism who can do a lot of good things for Louisville. We saw it especially with Sam, but Jae'Lyn, he still does some things where you're just like, he's loose with the ball. There was the one turnover in transition against Western Kentucky that was just like, I think he was not credited with the turnover, but he threw the ball to Roosevelt Wheeler
in a terrible spot
in transition. And I know Mac has been on him about being being better, taking better care of the ball and being a little bit more.
Do you remember
composed.
The word he used all the time about with Jordan Nwora? He's starting to use that over and over with Jae'Lyn, is being casual. And I think that a lot of Jae'Lyn's mistakes and some of his unforced turnovers and unforced mistakes, I think, are a product of him being casual. And that doesn't mean like he's lazy or he's out there loafing trying to be cute. It's just not being go back to the word you just used a minute ago, being engaged and locked in.
Yep. Yeah. And as you and I can both attest to, as every coach when you're 12 years old talks about, is two hands on the ball, being strong with the ball, making the right decision, being composed as you're making those decisions, slowing down mentally without slowing down physically to be able to do things that are fundamentally sound. Well, Nick, if you have, obviously you grew up here, this program really well, but you also know Chris Mack pretty well too. I'm curious what your read is on him these days. This has been a forgettable, difficult year in some ways for him. He's had a lot of things that he's probably pretty happy about with some of the guys they went out and got in the transfer portal. I think he likes the staff that he has. But there's obviously the suspension, the Dino Gaudio stuff, disappointment last year. What's your read on where he is as a competitor, as a head coach, as a leader of this program, and with someone with connections to this city, where I don't think people fully grasp the importance of this job to their family and what it means to them.
Yeah, I think Chris Mack knows this year 4 is very important. I think he knows last year missing the tournament, despite there being a lot of circumstances out of their control, that it still isn't good enough. And I think that's why you saw him decide to really make changes and address that and say, hey, I'm going to go hire a guy to really kind of be my offensive coordinator, if you will. I mean, I don't really know if that's the role right now Ross McMains necessarily has. Chris Mack is still the head coach, but that was a step in the right direction from how he's viewed as the fans, is that he understood that, hey, we got to make some significant improvements here. And they did that by going out and making some of those changes. And the way it played out with Dino, I mean, it really is just a very unfortunate situation that didn't work out well for anybody. And I think the friction between the basketball, well, I shouldn't say the basketball program, but clearly the decision to suspend Chris Mack was not one that I think anybody other than maybe one person was all in on, or maybe a board, and of course the president at that time. And that just, I mean, that impacted this program. I mean, losing your coach for however many weeks it was, we know it was 6 games, and most of those games were games they should have been able to win without him. I know they did come up short in one of those, which was against Furman, which is unfortunate, but I just think that has a bigger impact than most realize. I think the ability to recruit here is still an issue that people don't, I mean, so much time has passed that, and you see teams like Kansas and LSU and other programs have been able to kind of get by with not having a whole lot of impact on their program. And the difference is Louisville has a different coach now. I mean, I think that's a huge difference in how Louisville is still being viewed in this whole thing. Rick Pitino was fired from it. So there still is a cloud. There still is sort of a stain here that Mac has nothing to do with. What's unfortunate is that with the way the Dino stuff played out, and of course the accusations that he made, the school then self-reporting what Dino alleged, I mean, that really put Chris Mack in a very, very tough spot. And he knows that. I think he knows how important this season is. And if for some reason they don't have a season good enough to make the tournament, that's a really tough spot to be in after 4 years. But I also can't act as if he's had anything close to what would be a normal 4 years. And some would say, well, hey, still should have made the tournament, and he could have prevented the whole Dino thing from happening. Well, fair enough. But I mean, he also had a team that was really good in a year that, I know you know this because you follow college basketball as closely as anybody. There was like 20 to 30 teams that realistically felt like they could have won the national championship in 2020. Yeah. That's not normal. There's all kinds of teams that can randomly make the Final Four. College basketball in 2020 was as wide open as it's ever been. And Louisville was one of those teams that if you get hot, you got a really good player in Jordan Ward, you've got a good team, veterans, can get hot from 3. You could have made a deep run. And I think if that were to happen, I think he's viewed completely differently.
Yep.
Now, everybody didn't get a tournament that year. So it's not just them. It's not as if they're being picked on. But that year, they finished with the best winning percentage in the ACC since they've been in the league. That includes the previous regime being in the ACC. They were a good team. And I know people don't want to hear about a team from 2 years ago because, you worry about the now. But I just think had that team had and look, they could have lost early, and that would have maybe made things even worse. They weren't playing great basketball when that season came to an end. But I can't act as if things have been anywhere normal for him. And I know he knows that, but I think he's very careful about how he discusses those things because he doesn't want to sound like a victim. He doesn't want to sound like he's making excuses. But I look at it as it more, of an explanation than it is an excuse. I asked him at ACC basketball tip-off, I said, when you took this job, did you think that here we are many years later, you still wouldn't really be you're not close to having closure on things that happened beforehand? And I think he answered me before I finished the question, and he said, nobody would. So this thing lingering like it has in itself has been a big punishment. So I think he loves Louisville. I don't think he wants to coach anywhere else. I don't think he was happy with the way the suspension played out. He's got a great job, makes a lot of money, and this is still a great program. But there's no doubt about it. As we sit here on the end of December, how this season plays out is going to be crucial for him here.
Yeah. And look, I wrote this in my newsletter, and I've said this in a few places. I don't think that there is, I don't want to say even remotely, because of just how tense everything is around Louisville athletics, especially when you throw in the football side of this to the conversation. I think Chris Mack will be coaching at Louisville for a few more years at least. I don't think that it's anything other than that at this point. You don't have a president and you don't have an AD, and those processes take a while. So I think that's also a big factor in all of this. And we'll see how this all plays out. Like you mentioned, the IARP, we don't know when that's hopefully it'll be soon for everyone involved. But yeah, I just get the vibe that Chris is, he's been a little testy this year in some of his press conferences, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him for that kind of that edge that I think the team kind of needs to have as well, and has shown in a couple of games. But as we mentioned earlier, Nick, and this is how fickle sports can get, they've got a very navigable January, especially in the ACC. I mean, they could, I was talking about this the other day, including the Wake Forest game, I think only one team, and it wasn't Wake Forest, it was Florida State, ranked in the top 55 in the Ken Pom rankings among Louisville's opponents. So that just shows you how many teams are on the list that they could beat. And if they play like they did last night, you would think that they would win a bunch of those games. And the conversation at the end of January is very different than it is now. But I have a theory, Nick. I'm curious for your thoughts on this. How much do you think the tension around the football program and the tension around Neely Bendiputi's departure and the Vince Tyree situation, and just the tension, Louisville's always been tense since I've been here anyway. But it reaches these fever pitches through the course of the year, each year or whatever. How much do you think other stuff being as tense as it has been impacts how people think about basketball? Because like you said earlier, look, I mean, you can't lose to Furman and DePaul at home. You just can't. I know DePaul is a good team, a solid team. Furman is a good mid-major, but you can't lose those games at home. Nobody's arguing otherwise. But how much do you think that kind of the tension, the frustrations with other things going on, especially with football, have bled over into how people react after basically every single basketball game?
Oh, it's been a fact. I mean, it's to go back to what I think Vince Tyree said, is that fans just get to stapling things together, and they're not connected. I mean, I think the fans, like right now with football and men's basketball, which of course there are other great sports at UofL that are phenomenal. Jeff Walls, look at what he's built. Dan McDonald, hell, the volleyball team just had a flawless season that just came short in the Final Four. So I don't want to act as if those sports don't bring fans joy, but the moneymakers and the ones that get the majority of the attention are men's basketball and football. And I don't remember a time where there was this much apathy in both. And they do work together. I mean, when you've got a football team that loses close game after close game and that gets blown out by their rival, you look to the basketball program, which for the most part, I mean, the basketball program had won a couple of national championships before football really had much presence nationally at all. So it's always been the one you go to and you lean on, because you can say, even with the program where it is right now, you still feel justified in saying it's at least a top 10 program of all time. Some would say closer to top 5. So when you have the losses that you just mentioned, ones that, like you said, you can't do that at Louisville and not expect a lot of criticism. It is a factor. I mean, I also think there's opportunities there, right? So when things are going bad for football, if basketball could take advantage and kind of be like, for example, the Wake Forest win, in most years, that's not a win that gets a ton of celebration because it's kind of what you expect. And you were favorites last night, but I could sense there's a lot of joy from that win. And I think it's because Louisville fans, for those two sports specifically, are looking for something to be excited about. But there's no doubt the drama, the whole Neely Tyree saga was and to see that change happen in 48 hours, when you do have a setback, it leads some fans. And I do think that there's, and you know this, the vocal group is not the biggest group. They just seem much larger than they are. And that's not to say there's not criticism out there. There is. But, you know, when you hear people say, well, hey, let's just start fresh and get rid of everybody since we're getting a new AD, a new president, and maybe a new football coach after next year. I don't think I don't think those that say that represent a large group, but it's so easy for people to get caught up in that now. So to answer your question, it's absolutely a factor.
Yeah. And it's again, I'm not sure that it's fair to blame anybody in the fan base for feeling that way, because I mean, Lord knows, as we know from sticking microphones in faces of lawyers quite a bit over the last decade, the fan base has been through plenty. So I get why there's tension. I just feel like sometimes it impacts people's thought processes, and it's like media timeout to media timeout on Twitter with the angst. So it's understandable at times. Well, we'll leave on this, Nick. Let's switch to something a little bit more comfortable for both of us, a little bit more personal for both of us. Because of COVID, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you are the reigning fantasy basketball champs, are you not?
That is true.
Fantasy camp champs. I was impressed with you, man. Because when we first saw you out there, I was on the sidelines, and I remember you saying that you were like worried that you were going to be gassed by the end of it, but you got a second wind, and you carried your team to a fantasy camp victory, and that is a record achievement. Look at you! Look at that.
I brought it in the studio after we wrapped up camp a couple years ago, and it's been sitting here since. So
love it.
Good timing. I don't keep that on me at all times just to pull out to show people. So
you
it may
should.
have seemed that
You keep
way.
it in your pocket.
So that was a really fun experience, and I give Cahill Fennell credit. He was our coach, and I don't know if he did this strategically, but he drafted really young. And by the time you got to we didn't win a game in the league. We were in full play. Yeah. We didn't win a game. We were terrible. And but we had a youthful team and one really good player, not myself, a guy named Jace Vernon, who travels the country on like a circuit doing all these camps. He's gone to the Bill Self camp, the Calipari camp. And now that I've been in the camp, they send out newsletters all the time. He's collecting MVP trophies every camp he goes to. So he's why we were good. But by the time we got to the end of the camp on the last day is the tournament. And, you know, guys that were in their late 30s, early 40s that were really good players. I mean, heck, Chris Redmond. I mean, he played football in the NFL, but he's a pro athlete. So it's also, he's one of those guys when you're out there, he's making moves and doing things. You're thinking, oh, yeah, I could see how that guy was a pro athlete at some point. But those older guys, they were winded. On the last day, we went from not winning a game in full play to turning it around and getting 3 victories, I think it was, back to back in order to win. So it was a lot of fun. And what I did was whenever and I was not in great shape by then, I'm not in now, but they to evaluate players, they did half court. So it's like half court 3-on-3, which is a different world than when you're running up and down a full court. So I'm playing pickup games in weeks ahead of time weeks before time to try to get myself in better shape. But I'm playing on like church courts, Jeff, that are like tiny. Like as soon as you cross half court, you're about to pull up for 3.
Yeah.
So I never took that into account. And then I was younger, a little bit more fresh. I did really well. So I was like one of the first players picked. But then once we started running full court, it was a different animal. Yeah. I mean, I airballed free throws in that camp. I did not have a great showing, but it's not about me. It's about the team. And we won. I've got the hardware to prove it. And I asked Chris Mack whenever he decided to elevate Cahill Fennell, and he agreed that he knew when that team put together that run for the fantasy camp championship that the next time a spot opened up on his staff, Cahill was going to get the call up. And he did.
That's a true floor general right there. I like that you
That's right.
Credit to your team. And no, I mean, I have to say it was very fun being on the sidelines. Of course, every time I'm around basketball, I want to put on my shoes and go play. But it was fun to be on the sidelines and watch it, and be in the draft room when they were discussing prospects. And obviously it was asked that we kept that in-house, even though I didn't participate in the conversation. But there was one funny moment that I don't think anyone will care about me sharing, was they were running through these players, and people had notes on maybe like 5 or 6 guys or whoever they were watching closely, and they were moving around and watching. And there was one player, the room kind of got quiet, and everyone's like, I don't remember that guy. And of course, Bill Murray piped up and said, I watched him. He's a gamer. I don't remember who it was, but it was hilarious. He had like an actual like paragraph scouting report on this guy. So it was a pleasant surprise in that scouting room. It was very funny to be there.
The funnest part of that was, and there was a ton that made it fun. I would recommend anybody do it if you can. It's just a cool experience, but because it is an experience, they take it serious. Like that was it was kind of they played one shining moment and we cut the net down when we won. I mean, it was just hilarious because it's a bunch of old washed up dudes, but like they took it serious. You go get treatment at the training table like you're actually on a team. We had a locker. Like it's quite. I remember they had some of the players. In fact, gosh, it was that long ago. It was David Johnson and Sam Williamson. That class, they were freshmen, and Sam was one of the assistants on our team, and I'd come down and in fact, I have a two part here. First play of the game and the action. I got the ball on my hip. I'm like, all right, let's get in a set. Let's calm down. We were just running all over the place. And the last time I played basketball with a shot clock was 12, 13 years ago. So I didn't even realize there was a shot clock. We got a shot clock violation, and Mac just screamed at me, clowned me for not realizing there was a shot clock. But then later on in that same game, I dribbled down and just felt good about just rising and firing a three. And I did it, and it felt great. And I was like 2 feet short, and I airballed. And I'm like, man, so I'm kind of like, my bad, guys. And I look over to the sideline, and Sam Williamson, this 18-year-old freshman, is like, hey, keep shooting, like just coaching me up. And I'm like, what are we doing here? What is going on? Is this? And there's a reason, Jeff, they call it a fantasy camp. It's not real life.
Yeah, that's true. I always think, whenever I think of fantasy camps, I think of Cosmo Kramer coming back to New York after going to the Yankees fantasy camp and punching having punched Mickey Mantle in the face in the scrum. But yeah, highly entertaining, very enjoyable experience. And I'm happy for you that you got to cut down the nets. That's pretty cool. I've often dreamt of having, in England, they call them the mascots, when the little kids walk out with the players before the game. I've always dreamt of having that at a rec league soccer game here in town when I walk out on the field with the little kids. We can
make it happen.
We could, a choir singing in the background, a chorus.
Yeah, something like that.
Could be nice. Well, Nick, I appreciate your time, man. It's always good to catch up with you and chat basketball with you. And we will certainly have lots to talk about and watch over these next couple months, but keep up the great work. And I think, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be the last official guest here as we close out 2021. I mean, I was the main act, right? Everybody else was they were openers.
It was all a build up to this
exactly.
Big moment. Yeah.
No better way to end 2021. So thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it. You keep up the great work too. And I will see you soon, my friend.
All right. Thanks so much, buddy.